Hi there, and welcome to Insomnia Insight number 340, in which we'll go over something that I think is really important, which is the secondary attachment. I think as we start, going over this principle here, a lot of people will really recognize this, and I think again this is very important. So. Before we start, actually, I had an announcement, but I wanted to, yesterday I talked about books. I talked about books yesterday, and I forgot one that has become a real favorite of mine, and it is I was going to show it to you, but it's in another room, so I just write it here. It's by Claire Weeks, and it's called. You can just Google her, and I think it's her most popular book is called Healing for Your Nerves. Healing for Your Nerves by Claire Weeks. And it was, I believe it was Ernest who tipped me about this book here on the channel, and I just started reading it, and it's really resonates with me. Not all of it; it's always things that you disagree with, but her principle, Claire Weeks, check out her book. It's really good. So with that said, let's get to the secondary attachment here. First, I want to talk about the very fundamental. Briefly, the very fundamental here is that. Someone who sleeps really well, as we talked about in the past, often says that I sleep so well after having had a lot of trouble sleeping, now sleep so well because I don't care so much anymore. We often hear somebody say, like, I sleep well now because I don't really care about sleep anymore. In reality, that doesn't actually mean that this person truly doesn't care. It's because it's really that this person has become less attached to sleep. Somebody that's very attached to sleep, like I gotta get all my sleep, it's super important to me. That person will have a lot of trouble sleeping because that builds so much pressure and tension. Somebody who's less attached, who is, like Milena said in her interview recently in that success stories, if I sleep a certain amount, that's okay. If I don't sleep as much, that's also okay. Not being attached leads to really good sleep. So another way of saying that is that attachment, the more attached you are to like getting this amount of sleep, the stronger desire for sleep you will have, and the more trouble sleeping you have. So the primary attachment, when it comes to insomnia, the primary attachment is always to sleep itself, because you will never have somebody that doesn't have an attachment to sleep that has trouble sleeping. In other words, if you have no particular attachment to sleep, let's say somebody who's never ever had any trouble sleeping in their life, they have no particular attachment to sleep. They've never really, no particular relation to it. It's kind of neutral. So no attachment means no insomnia. So consequently, there has to be an attachment to sleep for you to have trouble sleeping. So the primary attachment is always to sleep in itself. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the secondary attachment. And here it is. So the secondary attachment is something that you believe comes from, or only from, or to a great degree from sleep, that makes it important to sleep. So the secondary attachment are things like this. I need to sleep more so that I feel less tired. That is a very common secondary attachment. The primary attachment to sleep itself, and the secondary one is something that is attributed to sleep, which is how you feel. So the secondary attachment in this example is I have to sleep more so I feel less tired. It can also be to have better skin, something like aesthetic, visual, something like that. I have to sleep more so that I have better skin, so that I look better. That's another example of secondary attachment, or something mood related. I have to sleep more so that I feel less depressed. I'm super depressed, and it's because I don't sleep at all. So I have to get more sleep so that I feel less depressed, or I don't lose my mind is one that I recently had a client who was very concerned about, like this, who had themselves identified this as a secondary attachment, but had a real hard time, kind of like even thinking of loosening that up. So these are examples of a secondary attachment. And think for yourself at this point in time, like, what is my primary attachment? Well, that's going to be to sleep itself, of course, but do I have a secondary attachment? Think about that for a second. And in the meanwhile, this is just kind of to kind of like to further illustrate how this works, is that you can actually it can go further than that. You can have tertiary attachment, which is, for example, I need to sleep better or more so I get better skin, so I find a girlfriend. So that's that we have another layer there. It's tertiary, and it can go on. It can be like, I have to sleep better so I get better skin, so I find a girlfriend, so I get married, so I have kids, etc. and kind of the more attachments and the longer they are, as you can see, the more pressure to sleep. So that's the key here. That's really kind of the first teaching point I want to get across here, is that the more attachments you have, either like many secondary attachments or this kind of long list of like tertiary, quarterly, I don't know if it was quaternary, I don't know what it's called, but either if you have many or kind of a deep layers of attachment, the more of those you have, the more pressured you are going to be to sleep. Because imagine if, if whether you have kids, you get married, you get a girlfriend, your skin, if all that hinges upon like that you have to get this amount of sleep, then you are going to build so much pressure to sleep that it's going to be very, very difficult. So the difficult truth here, and I think it's hard to even teach this, but I think it is super important. It is that without kind of loosening up that secondary attachment, tertiary attachment, or whatever it is, good sleep will remain elusive. I think it is true. So the question then, of course, becomes, how do I get there? Okay, I recognize that I have this secondary attachment or tertiary attachment, and I realize that, yes, if I didn't have that, I would feel less pressure to sleep and I would sleep better. So what are the 4 ways? There are more than 4 ways, of course, but the 4 ones I want to talk about here are, number 1, no surprise here, education, always so important. When you understand why you had trouble sleeping, how sleep is regulated, etc., there's less mystery, you worry less, and then it's easier to see that, okay, I realize that, for example, education is something like, there has actually never been any studies showing that little sleep causes skin problem, for example. That's a way of education that can loosen up that secondary attachment. Education and just in general, education is always really good because there's less anxiety when you understand things. Education is always really good. Detective work is another important one when it comes to, for example, fatigue. When you do that detective work and you specifically look for evidence that you can actually have a good day when you slept little, and the opposite, you can have a day where you're really tired when you slept a lot. Example of detective work, finding evidence that refutes the second attachment can be really helpful. And another one, which I think is really good when it comes to these secondary attachments, is thought work. And this is a very different approach where you think of, okay, I have this thought that I have to sleep enough so that I feel better. I feel less depressed during the day, for example. That is a thought, right? And then you think of like, is this thought a helpful thought for me to have or not? And if you find that, no, this is not a helpful thought for me to have, then you can create a goal thought. Okay, this is my current thought, and this is the goal thought I want to have. And then you can create these like bridging thoughts in between, and then you can, step by step, make your way towards your goal thought. I have a whole playlist on this called The Model. I encourage you to check it out. I think it's super helpful. That type of thought work is really, really good. And finally, I think this is a big one. I think maybe this is the biggest one. It is courage. It is courage. I think this is where it becomes so difficult to get past these secondary attachments. It is when you, for example, you feel like that time I hardly slept at all for 3 days. I know I was about to lose my mind. I was about to go crazy. So I have evidence. I have solid evidence that if I sleep little, I can lose my mind. So therefore, that secondary attachment is it's real. It's real, and this is where like courage comes in. You often have to do things that are, that your brain is kind of revolting against. It's like, you can't do this. For example, I always teach befriending wakefulness, for example, where you say, okay, when you're awake at night, try to do something that's enjoyable. Make wakefulness your friend. And if you have this secondary attachment, it's like, how can you do that? You got to get more sleep. You got to get more sleep because it's so important. Because if I don't get sleep, I will lose my mind, etc. And this is where courage comes in. You often really have to do things that go against that safety part of your brain, trying to keep you safe. So I think courage is a very important one here. So I would love to hear feedback on secondary attachments here, thoughts, comments, experiences, etc. If leave them in the comment section, and if anyone has a question that you would like me or Coach Michael to answer here, please send that question, of course, to questions@thesleepcoachschool.com. And for anyone out there who wants a little bit more support, guidance, etc., you are very welcome to check out BedTyme on the App Store where I coach. So that said, I hope this was helpful, and I'll look forward to having you back here real soon. I I actually meant to just record this. I didn't realize I went live, so that's why I'm a little flustered here. But we have some live comments here. Stacy says, "Hi again. Thanks so much for the early reply. Anytime. One last concern: the conditioned arousal doesn't just go away, even when I practice acceptance of fatigue, self-kindness, etc. Why does the sleep drive take days or weeks to overcome the break?" Okay, got it. First of all, I want to say this. There's a lot of confusion around conditioned arousal. The way it is taught in traditional like cognitive behavioral therapy is, in my opinion, not the best. There's confusion there. So the way it is traditionally taught is this, that when you have trouble sleeping, when you have insomnia and you spend time in your bed not sleeping, then the bed and the bedroom environment becomes associated with insomnia, which can lead you to a place where even just like going to your bedroom can trigger that arousal, and then you can't sleep. The problem here is that that is not the most important conditioned arousal. That is very simplistic, and that kind of simplistic teaching leads to a lot of unwanted outcome, let's call it. For example, it leads you to think it is really important that you don't spend any time awake in your bed. So that leads you to think that, okay, I've been awake now. I think it's been 5 minutes. I really don't want to do this. I'm going to get out of bed. So you jump out of bed, and then you wait till you feel sleep. And then you're like, okay, now I think I can sleep now. I think I'm going to go in there and reassociate the bed with sleep. And you go in your bed and you're like, okay, now I got to sleep. But I'm not sleeping, but I should, etc. It creates so much frustration and anxiety. So what is the true conditioned arousal? In my opinion, well, it is this. The conditioning is wakefulness has become conditioned to be looked at by your brain as a threat. That is the conditioned arousal, in my opinion. It is the thought of wakefulness, the thought of being awake. When that causes fear, that is the conditioned arousal, the conditioned response that is underlying everything. So the bedroom environment, that is not important at all. That the wakefulness, when that causes fear, there you have it. That is the arousal mechanism that is problematic when it comes to insomnia. And the way you really, in my opinion, the way you have to work with that is befriending wakefulness again, which I always talk about. Make being awake is something that is not a liability and not a threat, not an enemy, and make it something that is acceptable, that is okay, that is your friend, that is, something like that, neutral at least, that is the way around that. And when you no longer associate being awake with problem, fear, like that then you have taken a great step in the right direction. And now, and that is again, and so why doesn't it just go away even when I practice acceptance, etc.? I think it has to do with intent. So, and that's another problem with the traditional CBTI teaching, which is, okay, now you have this conditioned arousal, but you should change it to this. All right. So it tells you like, do this to change your conditioned arousal. But here's the thing. These associations cannot be forced. You cannot go to bed and be like, okay, now I'm gonna recreate this association with sleep and the bed. It cannot be forced. It has to come naturally, and that's why, again, like when you do things like you watch Netflix in the evening, you have a book prepared overnight, you stop checking the time, by the way, it's always a good thing. But then, then you change that association again, because when wakefulness becomes acceptable, that is the way. Because whenever you try to force an association, you kind of force the conditioned arousal to go away, etc., it's going to get real sticky. And then why does the sleep drive take days or weeks to overcome the break? It often feels like that because, things are often very erratic. You go like 4 days without any sleep, and then finally you sleep. And it seems like I just, for some reason, I have to have this hyper, super duper sleep drive to even get a little bit of sleep. But in fact, that is very just a part of the truth. The truth is really that at some point, whenever you sleep, that is because you have less break, you have less hyperarousal. Somebody who is in a constant state of super high hyperarousal, no matter how sleepy they are, they will never really sleep that much. So the sleep drive it's helpful, but it's not the key. Hyperarousal is the thing. So if you go in a direction of thinking like, I really got to get that sleep drive going, you will feel pressure to sleep. It is always about reducing the hyperarousal, in my opinion. So why does it take days or weeks to overcome the break? It isn't that you're building up a super strong sleep drive over days or weeks. It is that sometime, once in a while, for some reason, you are trying less. Maybe you're exhausted, so you don't even your hyperarousal system isn't really kicking in, something like that. Good sleep always happens. More sleep happens almost entirely, in my opinion, from less break and not more gas. And that is super important, I think, because when you think of that, when that really sinks in, when non-attachment becomes the goal, when you're like, I'm going to try less, etc., that makes it so much easier. There's much less pressure to sleep when you look at it that way, when you look at it as a break issue, not a gas issue. So hope that helped, Stacy. And for anyone out there, again, send me questions. And now there's another live question here. Hello, thanks for your content. I have an issue with microsleeps. In my experience, even a 10-second long microsleep has severe impact. It's been my main issue for a while. I want to say that, if you think about it from a gas and break perspective again here, anyway, let's see here. I try to combat it by standing for the last hour of the night, but my brain just makes me sit again. I totally get it. When you think of this from a gas and break perspective here again, a 10-second microsleep is, what impact is that going to have on your sleep drive, your body's need for sleep? Nothing. What impact does it have? So why is it then, if you take a 10-second microsleep thing, why does that have such huge impact on your sleep? It is not because it reduces your sleep drive. It is because it increases your hyperarousal, right? So even a second-long micro nap, if you realize, oh my God, I fell asleep. No, I destroyed my sleep. That's it. I made a huge mistake. Now I'm not going to sleep again. If that is why it has so much impact. So if you just work on understanding this, so that you see that, okay, a little micro nap is not going to have any impact on my sleep drive. But if I think of it as like problematic, it can definitely increase my hyperarousal. So if you think of it as like, oh, I have some microsleep, okay, good. That's a sign that I am getting sleepy. It's a welcome sign. That is hugely helpful there. And here, like, I try to combat it by standing. Whenever I hear like combat, I want to beat this thing, how can I win this fight, etc., that always tells me that, okay, this person is fighting, is trying, is wanting to sleep, which always leads to more trouble sleeping. It is only when you abandon the fight, you abandon the combat, abandon the struggle, abandon that, when you walk away from it and you make peace with wakefulness, that is when sleep comes your way. So that's my general advice. And I will be back here on Friday answering questions, 2 p.m. So anyone who has questions, send an email or check in on Friday again. Look forward to having you real soon.